Hello and welcome back to the Family Office Podcast. I am here with my colleague and co-host as ever, Lucy. Lucy, how's it going?
Hey Gus, yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. How about you?
Yeah, busy as always. I mean, we're nearly halfway through the year, and I don't know how that's happened. We've been traveling so much, so many events. I know it's a refrain that we keep coming back to the beginning of each podcast, but it's been a busy year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been crazy busy. Every time I speak to someone in industry and members, they're always asking, where are you off to next? Where have you been? It's exactly where we want to be. And, we're collecting those Avios points, so can't complain. But yeah, we've got a lot going on this year. Super exciting. By the time that this podcast will be live, I think I would have just done the longevity dinner that we've got in London, which is super exciting. We're partnering with a private health clinic to educate our members around, longevity and how to not just live longer, but live longer in a better condition, which I think is
a good one, right?
It is. I mean, people love to still meet up for a drink around Mayfair, but, health and wellness is definitely at one of a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. We've got a life science investing for family offices dinner coming up on my side soon in London. And that's a massive market, underserved, especially with tech in the US. The US healthcare system's kind of limping through basically. So yeah, we seem to be doing lots of bio health and life stuff right now. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, super topical. And we're heading off to Switzerland, which is definitely a place for healthy living, in the end of May, right? You're going to be heading up Zurich and I'm going to be in Geneva.
Yep, back in Switzerland with our long-term partners, Jersey Finance, hosting funds and family office events. Those are focused on tokenization, but they're wider conversations across the board. And both those communities are growing really, really nicely. So yeah, very, very exciting stuff. And then obviously in just under a month's time now, we're back to New York for the New York Family Office Summit.
Mm-hmm. I know. Well, we got a lot geared up to that, and there's a lot of excitement and momentum. We love New York, obviously, and it's one of our larger communities.
Buzzing. Yeah. The sign-ups for that, or the applications for that, have been higher than any other event I think we've ever done. So yeah, that's really pushing. And we will have John King there as well, who was our guest on this episode. Which
yes.
Is exciting.
Well, Gus, I'll leave you to introduce John because he's a long-term friend of yours. So give us a little overview. Who is John?
Yeah, John and I go back a long way. We worked in the same office for two different companies. Way back when, and he was hitting the phones and speaking to institutional allocators to understand their investment appetite, basically. And I was working on a few different things there, including Hedge Brunch, which is obviously the origin of AU. And we got talking and connected over that. He subsequently moved on to raising funds in-house for GPs, and did so very successfully, and is now working in the IEA, the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is a conservative think tank in the UK that we're very close with. Naturally, within that, family offices come into the conversation a lot, and John's combination of private market experience and his space in the political sphere is really, really relevant to family offices, hence the conversation. And you'll find him to be one of the most fluent and articulate people when it comes to family offices and the crossover from public life to private markets. Very, very interesting chat.
Okay, great. Well, we look forward to hearing from John, and I hope you guys enjoy the episode.
John, welcome to the Family Office Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a bit about what you do, your current role, and how you got there?
Well, I'm currently Director of External Relations for the Institute of Economic Affairs. But many might be asking why that makes me relevant in a family office podcast. I spent the last approximately 10, 15 years in cap intro and private equity. Lastly, I finished as a partner in my last firm. And actually, initially was approached by the Institute of Economic Affairs to be a donor. Which was obviously fine, but was asked to see if I could come and give some expertise into them growing their community and growing what they're doing. And I was very, very pleased to go and help out because I started my career there. So many moons ago, a long time before I started in Cap Intro, I had a gap year at the IEA, and I worked there briefly before getting the job at Morano Connect. So I hold a lot of affinity for the place. It's a great place, and it's.
So that was out of school into politics, maybe not finance, into finance. 10 years there, and now a foot in both camps.
Yeah, I've always thought that the most interesting people don't know what they want to do with their lives. So maybe I'm one of those. Who knows? but school, university, first year of university, met Steve Davies at the IEA. He was launching their education department at the time. Asked me to come and work for him. Spoke to my parents and said, I'd take this job when I graduated, so I would definitely take it for a gap year. Worked at the IEA for a year doing that, back to university, finished my degree, and then went back to the IEA post-university ahead of going into finance.
Were you active in politics as a kid, as a teenager? Was that of interest? Or?
Not really, other than my grandfather being pretty anti-Blair. Although I do remind myself that actually, if you start comparing manifestos, the Blair Manifesto of '97, it looks far more right wing than it did in '97. But not really. I started in politics really at sixth form college, so I did a politics degree, and then I went to university. I founded my own society there called the Southampton University Freedom Society, which espoused many of the ideas that the IEA, or nearly all of the ideas the IEA espouses. Limited government. Individual freedom and pro economically literate pro growth policies, and so that's where it all started really. And then met a chap called Simon Richards who was running the Freedom Association at the time, and then met Steve Davies, and then got the job at the IEA.
So you've touched on it briefly, but the IEA, what is the purpose of it? What's the goals and the agenda for the organisation?
Well, the IEA was founded in 1955. Unbelievably, it's the oldest free market think tank in the world. It's the real genesis of the free market movement. So all of the stuff with Joseph Margaret Thatcher in the 80s was really founded in 1955 by Anthony Fisher after a conversation he had with F.A. Hayek, who is if many don't know, the bastion of free market economics. Many people watching this podcast will know that he is that, and forgive me for having to explain it. But it's far better to shape ideas. So Anthony Fisher, our founder, wanted to go into Parliament, and Hayek said to him, no, it's far better to shape ideas and the arc of that than to go in and talk about individual policies and legislative process and all that stuff. So that's where the genesis of the IEA started in 1955. It started with those free markets views. Andrew Marr called us undoubtedly the most important think tank in the history of Britain. Famously, we're very proud of that accolade in Andrew Marr's modern history of Britain. So ever since 1955, we have been the voice for limited government, the voice for small and low taxes, the voice for wealth, the voice for economically literate policies that grow the economy, where prosperity is for all, a rising tide, floats all boats. That's not how it goes, but that's something like that. So we've been doing that since 1955, and prominently that was, we saw the most sort of free market government in the 80s, and then the lag on that. So the changes were made in the 80s by Margaret Thatcher, but actually the prosperity, I would strongly argue, that we saw in the 90s and into the noughties was very, very much about the changes that Thatcher made, about changing us towards a service-led economy, and specifically a financial services-led economy. And many people watching this will be the product of that. Will be very well acquainted with the expertise that Britain has cultivated since the 80s in financial services, particularly.
And how does the IEA relate to government? What's the bridge? Is it? Do you lobby? Do you consult? How does it connect on a day-to-day basis?
So obviously, being so old, so well established, we're very well known by MPs, by the legislature broadly, but also by Westminster and I hope the whole country. But really the IEA's role is to be a North Star. You say, this is the things that we need to be doing, and you need to listen to us. But it's not to go, say, to Keir Starmer or to, Kemi Badenoch if she becomes Prime Minister, this is what you should be doing. We are a North Star to say these are if you want economic growth, if you want limited government, you want to promote freedom of your demos, of your people, then these are the policies that you should be enacting. But we don't sort of force them down throats, or nor do we actively lobby doing that. We do the good work ourselves and encourage people to read it, frankly.
And is it across the aisle, or are most of the the ones listening to you on the Conservative side?
So it's across the aisle, yes, certainly, and we are non-partisan. We're free markets. I often talk about the experiments that, what happens if the Conservative Party got really socialist tomorrow? What happens if the Labour Party got really, really free market tomorrow? That wouldn't really matter to us. But naturally, you'd probably see more people in the Labour Party in that scenario being sort of friendly to us than the Conservative Party. So our principles don't change. A bit like Churchill. Churchill said this many years ago. Churchill famously was across many parties. And he said, I changed my party when their principles changed. And that's certainly the IEA. We are non-partisan, and we believe in a set of principles that we think are tried and tested, and what we know are tried and tested, and that work for politics and economics. And when parties change, they can certainly read our stuff. And that certainly counts for the Reform Party, the Lib Dems, the Labour Party, and the Conservative Party, and any other reformist party that wants to make itself known between now and the next election.
So you've spoken on the connection between the IEA and government. What is the connection between the IEA and family offices?
There is such a lack, and hopefully many people in this watching this podcast, dare I say, maybe from foreign shores, will see there is such a lack of a voice for wealth and talent in this country. We seem to be of this mindset that the pie has grown so big, and we're happy with it, or content to some level with it being of a size, and we just need to squabble about how we tax and spend that pie. The IEA fundamentally disagrees with that. The IEA believes that the pie should be much larger. Now, you're hearing a lot at the moment by a few prominent people about how we ought to tax the rich, and how we ought to make, dare I say, quite a negative environment for wealthy, talented people in this country. That's not the road to economic prosperity. That's not what created the prosperity of the 80s and 90s. We need to be fervent in our idea and our belief as a country, as a government, that wealthy, talented people are people that we want to attract. Because yes, we attract their money, and if you live in a country, you're far more likely to invest in that country. That's a positive. But if you come to this country, if you're native to it or not, if you live in this country, you're likely to be talented. If you're talented, you're setting up businesses. If you're setting up businesses, you're employing people. If you're employing people, if you're that way inclined, even a Labour Party could get on top of the idea that if you're employing people, they're paying you more tax, and more tax means you can spend more. We at the IEA wouldn't be framing it in such a way, but there is very few downsides to bringing wealthy people and talent into the country. And more to the point, there is also something to be said about the behavioral differences when you create a negative tax environment for the wealthy, right? Because what if I'm a 19-year-old tech entrepreneur who's not got £20 to his name, but actually I've got the next big idea, and I've got some big dreams about where my business is going to go? Do I really want to be in a country that's undynamic? That's if I do make it, it's going to
penalise your success if you succeed.
Exactly. So that behavioural difference, that behavioural break on ambition, that a tax system and a broader political system
and risk taking, I might add,
and risk taking, quite, is so important. That's hand in hand with the with the real politique of what we're taxing people all the time. The other thing to say about wealth taxes as well is that it's just such an incoherent strategy at the moment. We've got stamp duty on shares, we've got CDT that's going up. I don't think there's anyone in the Treasury, in the last 15 years during a Conservative government, or indeed in the current Treasury, thinking about a coherent strategy for what the offer is to a wealthy person coming in. And Switzerland thinks about that all of the time. Mm-hmm. But also, what the coherent strategy is. So, we can't just tax every other bit of income.
Well, it seems that they're just pushing to chase people off right now. It really is a real-time exodus. We have AU members who live in the UK, and I reckon we've probably had one a week leave this year.
Yeah.
And every conversation we have is Dubai, Switzerland, Miami, Milan. Where can we go? Portugal, Lisbon. Where can we go? Who wants us? Basically, we had Mittal leave 2 days ago.
Probably.
One of the biggest family offices in the world. We are not in a position where we are encouraging that at all. We're chasing people off. and doesn't seem thought through.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got incredibly arrogant on about two things, I believe. First thing is we've got incredibly arrogant about economic growth. We've just kind of thought that it's always going to happen, right? That being the case, what we're seeing very prominently with Labour at the moment is what happens when you start, and actually the Conservative Party aren't innocent of this either, but when you start deprioritizing growth and what actually happens to economies and what happens to confidence when you put up things like NI. So we've got very, very arrogant that the economy will just keep growing no matter how much we tinker and regulate it and do this and that. And the other thing that we've got incredibly arrogant about, it's laughable, but it's how important London is to a wealthy person. Now, this happened all in the 70s, right? The economy, this country and the world is a completely different place. Capital is so much more cosmopolitan than it was in the 70s. I mean, people have been talking about the world being a global economy since the 29 crash, but no, it's truly global. You can dial in via video call to a meeting in London from Singapore in a moment's notice if you want to. Let's wake up to that. So what is the pitch to somebody who's wealthy and wanting to be able, and actually for so long the pitch has been good legal system, time zones, schools, language. And these are all really, really important things, but they're not important, in the face of things like completely taxing our wealthy and talented to oblivion. Because as I've just explained, that has the real politic issues with that, but also the behavioural problems that come with it too.
So we talked about IEA, we talked a bit about the work there. Can we just get back to your finance hat?
Yes.
And the decade or so there, because that's a big reference point for what you're doing now. Obviously, huge experience in the capital markets there, and specifically with private capital markets in family offices. Tell us a bit about that journey. There was 3 different elements to it, and how you went through that, and how that kind of informed your understanding crossing back into politics and
Well, indeed, and I think actually you're so right in saying that one of the first people that I met that I thought was incredibly impressive was Alexander Hoare of Hoare's Bank, and he was the person that explained to me about the pyramids of earnings. Right, so if you're at the top of politics, how much do you earn? Probably more. In public service, 250k, something like that. Civil service. If you're at the top of finance and banking, you're earning billions. Right? And he was the first person that sort of made me awake to that. He said, what you're really good at is explaining, complex economic ideas to lay people in the IEA. That's what I was doing at the IEA at a very junior level. So why not go and do that in finance? And so I started my financial career at Morano Connects, which gave me a huge, I make speeches to students regularly, and I say that was a really, really formative time for me. Incredibly hard work, every bit as hard as a graduate.
what was the remit, Morano?
So Morano, we would make somewhere between 100 to 120 calls a day to investors, and asking them where they were allocating, basically understanding
You're not pitching investments. You're looking for appetite.
It's just to say, what are you investing? But obviously there's a skill in talking to an investor and understanding what they invest in. So, one of the things I always say is that, it's easy to say what you're investing in. But actually the question should have always been, what are you worried about? Because then you get a far better answer. Right? I'm really worried about volatility at the moment. Well, there's a CTA that can help with that. I really, the VIX is through the roof at the moment. How do I hedge against that? Well, there's a fund that can help you do that. For example, that's too very volatility based.
Did you also have warm relationships with these investors, or was this almost like a cold call approach?
I mean, it started that way. I mean, my approach very straightforwardly was to cultivate a relationship and cultivate a mutual value there. So there are some of the investors that I speak to even now, even in politics, that I still keep in touch with.
These are all professional investors, aren't they?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Institution level, family offices, pension funds.
Single family offices upwards, basically. But there's still people that I speak to today, that I'm still friendly with and sort of check in on and speak with. And there is an element of still sort of doing a bit of that facilitation work with interesting businesses, and some of the stuff that I work with AYU directly on is doing that work too, is sort of bringing interesting businesses to your networks, and indeed to doing that with my established network. So I think I'll always do that private markets thing. I find it really, really interesting. I just think that what I'm doing at the moment is far more important, because I have this theory of bell curves of intelligence. So actually, we're all on a balcony of intelligence. None of us believe in eugenics or anything like that anymore. So the point is that we must all believe that we all fit within some sort of median of intelligence. So what really matters is where you're born, right? So if you're born in Singapore, if you're born in London, then actually you're probably going to have a much bigger chance of being a millionaire. If you're born in the global south, then you're probably not going to have a very big chance of being a millionaire or even a billionaire, right? So actually the macroeconomic, macro political environment is far more important than being an actor in private markets within it. And I don't mean to make myself sound like the most altruistic person in the world, but to me, that's really, really important to create that environment, to invest in someone like the IEA, which is actively trying to create that environment for the UK, before I then go back into private equity and private markets and whatever else, to work in a normal fashion and do all of the wonderful things that I was doing before.
So you've gone from a big pool of investors and data and relationships, focusing it down a little bit, and then moving actually in-house to a private equity fund. How did that differ, the relationships? Were you getting kind of more closely in conversation with the family offices you're working with? Was it pension funds, or what was the mix of people there as well?
I think before we go there, I think the first thing to say is that the progression there, the interesting progression there is actually in a refinement of understanding how you do it, how you speak to people, and what you do. That may be old hat for a lot of people, but coming from a university setting or from a political setting, and into a very sort of high finance setting there was a lot of hard yards made to understand how to speak. And that was all really quite organic. I had to just learn it myself. There's a friend of mine who's written a book called Think Like a Spy. And that's really a really good distillation. So MI6 teach their spies to do the things that I had to learn myself about cultivating relationships and bringing people on board. So that's really interesting. So from that, just refining down. When I went to that private equity, it was a healthcare private equity strategy. The biggest thing actually was being able to say no. I think a lot of people in cap intro will just be so happy to do whatever they can to get something over the line. And actually one of the biggest lessons I learned with that was actually, in that fund, we were looking for partners who were willing to partner with us and to be good investors for us, and not for just anyone that would just give us money. And so, one of the first and hardest lessons that I learned there was to say, actually, you're probably not an investor for us. And that's something quite powerful in that. And that's something that I take forward into my career there, but indeed into politics as well, is actually, you're always looking for people to work with you and not just offering a product to anyone that will buy it. So I think that's really important. But
what are some of your requirements in terms of when you were in that position where you'd work with, let's say, a family office or an institutional investor,
yes,
and others that you would happily almost say, I would turn away the money for this relationship?
Yeah, I think, obviously the personal relationship is really, really important. It's as important really for a fund manager as it is for an investor. Really.
It goes both ways. We say that about doing DD on both sides.
Completely agree. You want to know people that you can pick up the phone to, especially if things go badly, and say, actually we've done this badly, and I want to have an honest relationship with you, and an honest conversation with you about that. There's an amount of sophistication as well, which makes things easy. Not that we ever really turn people away if they weren't sophisticated, but the fact that you can just say, plug me into your back office team, and I can plug you into my back office team, and it's all done, rather than sort of having to white glove the whole process. But then the biggest one by far for us, because don't forget we're private markets, EBITDA, and EBITDA multiples were fundamental to how the fund was valued. And indeed, the sort of the EBITDA arbitrage play that we were after in that market. So we were very much on train, and we had a lot to in common with first generation wealth. So people that understood businesses, understood what drove businesses, understood what's under the hood, and weren't just expecting linear gains and all this kind of stuff. So that by far and away was the biggest thing for us, was people that understood the business, because they understood business broadly, and what we had to teach them was just how to understand the healthcare bit, and they were a dream.
Is there Given that, is there a different uptake to institutional investors who are professionally investing massive pools of essentially sacred capital that they have to look after very, very, very carefully, and private capital, which is maybe your identity if you're speaking to a family office director who's not in the family, or maybe a family member? What's the difference between those two things when you're having that conversation?
I mean, this won't be news to anyone listening to this podcast, but it's the main difference, and it was really, really important for us, was siloing. Right? So institutional investors tend to be a little bit more risk averse, but not as a, not every one of them, but certainly, if you can speak to someone at the top of a family office about an investment idea broadly and why it's interesting, why it's good, rather than go, you need to speak to the hedge fund guy, you need to speak to the private equity guy, and being bounced around people, nobody really knows what to do with it, for example, rather than just looking. And I think actually there's a lot to be lost there. Actually, and forgive me if this is too personal, but one of the rules that I have in my own portfolio is when people approach me to ask me to manage my portfolio, I always say to them, I always hark back to my Murano days. Because if they picked up the phone to me in Murano, and there's no sort of vendetta in this. If they picked up the phone to me in Murano, I know that they'd be interested, they'd be willing to hear interesting ideas. And there are a lot of places that were not willing to hear interesting ideas and would never pick up the phone. And I won't name names, but there's some very, very prominent wealth managers out there who just didn't want to hear that and did this very top down asset allocation and just tried to find the best horse that they could, rather than go, actually, who's doing interesting things, say in hedge funds, private equity. And that's the real genesis of what the market is. One of my very good friends is the founder of Sabre Asset Management, and he says, he said that hedge funds are an alternative product. They're not a thing to fit into a hole that you have missing that says UK equities. It's like, what are you doing that's arbitraging the market or making some efficient gains there that I wouldn't be making if I was in a long only fund, for example. And that's the fundamental question that you should be asking if you're investing in alternative funds, in my view.
Super interesting. I wanted to circle back actually, because I think this would be interesting to those who are listening who are trying to engage with family offices. You talk about your days of picking up the phone and speaking to these investors. What are sort of, I guess, and again, there's definitely levels to this, I'm sure, but what's your high level takeaway of how you should be speaking to investors or family offices and engaging with them? What's John King's top 3? This is your kind of
Which, by the by, is not off the table now because you're also raising for the IEA to further that cause as well, basically. So you're not doing that anymore, right?
Oh no, we're quite. Yeah, it's still really, really relevant. I think it's quite funny actually, just harping back to not plugging his book, but Think Like a Spy, my friend that wrote this book, and how to sort of cultivate relationships. It's a great thing, great read. But, for me, I think I found that bit really easy, and it came really naturally to me. So it's so difficult when actually one of the things that comes up at work quite regularly is juniors will approach me and say, can you teach me how to do it? And I've got to sort of sit there and think, what is it? And so when I read that book, I was like, well, actually, this is a good distillation of what it is, but I've never been able to write it down because I just found it quite natural. So what I would say first and foremost, though, to answer your question straightforwardly is I've always said it's not hard. And many people make it a lot harder than it needs to be. Right? At the very, very base level, now I'm not sure I would recommend this, but at the very, very base level, if you want a network in investors, maybe not in family office, but you want a network in investing, pick up the phone and speak to investors, right? Very, very easy thing to do. When you're talking about family offices, as we all know, that becomes a lot more difficult. It's much more about handshakes and knowing who, and actually we're a very trusting community. AYU is a very trusting community. And that's why, quite rightly, you're so focused on who you let into this community. And that's what really is the value of it. The family office conference that we had over Oktoberfest in October. How much quality did I speak to of people there that day? Every single person I spoke to, and I was there with the IEA hat on. I was also doing a little bit of consultancy work for a startup business in cleaning, or cleaning products. And every single person I spoke to was intelligent. They could leverage capital if they needed to. And it's been absolutely fantastic. And the most efficient day probably I've spent in my entire life. The amount of people I spoke to that were really good. So it's a little bit more difficult with family offices. And I think actually long may that continue, to be honest with you. I think there are so many people that want to make this whole thing efficient. Like it's this really easy thing where you just create a website and people go here and there. And actually, you get it, guys. It's a white glove situation. People need to trust you first. One of the things that I was really, really big on at Apex, at Murano, was that I'd never ever take an investment that I didn't believe in myself. In my private equity fund, I was an investor in that fund. you've got to be confident that the product that you're taking is something that you can, hang your hat on. And certainly, obviously I feel that about the IEA too. I think it's not only a product that I can hang my hat on, but probably one of the most important voices in the country today. Far more important than, not this is, well, it is a plug. It's a straightforward plug for the IEA, but our donor tiers aren't even that big. To sustain the IEA, we are less than a £5 million organisation. But do you know what? The work we can...
You're not raising $1 billion fund here, are you?
Exactly.
You are, yeah.
Exactly. But the work we can
Small
do...
amounts to make a big difference.
Right. And the work we can do to change to move the needle at a macroeconomic level in the UK is so big. And my work with the IEA doesn't need to be more than a couple of years, and we can hopefully put a good base with your help, Gus, and with the help of the community. Hopefully we can put a good base in. So there's always a very, very prominent and strong voice for the right things in Westminster. Mm-hmm. Because when we lose that voice, we get things like national insurance rises on employers that are just completely economically illiterate.
So hopefully with that, we are going to be fighting for the interests of UK asset managers and also startups as well.
Yes,
so
yes.
direct investment. We had a dinner last night. We were talking about SEIS and EIS and all the red tape that people have to go through in order to start a company in this country. The barriers to credit, the barriers to just going out there and taking a risk and building things. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it is hard. It's really, really hard. So, I mean, I guess kind of wrapping up now, we're running out of time a little bit here, but going back to putting your IEA hat on, what do you think is going to happen in the UK, specifically in relation to how attractive we are for family offices over the next 3 years, the rest of this government, and then potentially after that?
Well, I know some of the work that you're doing, Gus, at the moment is very much at the forefront of government there. I hope and have an expectation that we'll probably end up doing some stuff collaboratively, AYU, IEA dinners and things.
Yeah, we're in America on the 4th and 5th of September with the Department of Business and Trade, where we are encouraging US family offices to invest in the UK. And that's alternative managers and startups.
Probably.
You'll be there. You'll be speaking as well. So I haven't told you that, but you will be.
Well,
Sorry to interrupt.
No, I wholly agree. So I think, all power to your arm for doing that, because, that's not, you're doing that because you want to, not because you have to, right? Let's be frank about it. And we're aligned on this mission to make the UK attractive to capital. It's perhaps not just family capital, but it's capital broadly, right? Mm-hmm. So, what do I think? The next 3 years, I think that the bad prognosis is that I think that the current government want growth, but have no idea how to get it. I think, doing things like national insurance rises and taking the real confidence out of the economy, showing that I hope for better. And I'm a genuine patriot in that sense. I've got no dog in this fight. If tomorrow we were seeing some really, really good economically competent illiterate policies, I'd be, showing it from the rafters.
But they're still standing in the bucket right now, aren't they?
Well, quite. Trying to pull themselves up. Very, 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 very true. So I think, there is an amount of looking at the horizon, I think. And I think that there is certainly a very, very straightforward need and an understanding that for the next reformist government, that believes is economically literate and believes in a growing economy, that we have to have a very, very good offer to bring people back. So people that have left, that's fine. But actually, to bring them back is a far higher bar, right? So
and sorry to interrupt again, but is that not a tanker that's quite hard to turn around? Because can you turn that around in one term? Can you turn it around for 29? So.
I think you can. And actually, the things that we're hearing from the top of the shadow government at the moment, not to name names, is that they understand that they have to be radical.
They're going to have to come out.
Yeah. And it's going to have to be
swinging
big things. And actually, we need to attract wealth and talent to these shores, and we need to retain wealth and talent on these shores. And I think they get it. Now, we haven't seen policies, so I can't be the one to say that this has been baked in, but everything that we're hearing is that's.
Is that a factor of where we are in this term? Policies will come soon. They're not going to come just when the election's around the corner.
Well, yeah, I'm not here really to talk for the Conservative Party, but I think that it's wise for any policy platform to take time. Right? I think just pushing out policy for the sake of it and just sort of, the big criticism of policy formation in Conservative and Labour and Lib Dem and where else is basically been done by 20 odd year olds for far too long. And actually the talent in policy making has been gone. I think where the Conservative Party is getting it right is that they're engaging people like the IEA and other think tanks, CPS, TPA, to really inform their policy platform and to move forward with a coherent policy platform that's been formed by properly, educated and people that have been in the free market movement, for example, for decades rather than months.
Yeah. Well, the vast majority of people that have been part of this exodus are those that have worked for 10, 15, 20 years, if not longer. I'd say the bulk is young families, entrepreneurs who've built something for themselves, and they have a couple of young kids, and they're going, I'm not going to get taxed like this. I'm not going to be in a position. So speaking to those guys and saying that they've moved to Dubai, 30, 31, 32, this is going to be a place for you again, is a really interesting conversation. And hopefully that's going to be there. I mean, it is very regular now, and our regime is not attractive, right? So we can come out and have this conversation. I know that we're still kind of holding cards at the moment.
Well, the IEA is very, very clear on what that looks like, by the way. It's just that there's a difference between what the IEA is talking about and what's being implemented in policy. And as I've just explained, that isn't a linear connection, and nor would we ever want it to be. We're very, very clear about what that looks like. And obviously, we've got some dinners in the AU program that we'll explore that more with key figures in politics and in philosophy and thinking more broadly. But yeah, certainly I think one of the things the IEA really wants to be is the standard bearer for wealth and talent, and the attracting wealth and talent and retaining that. And that's a mission for us in the short term. You'll be hearing a lot more of that. We just actually released a podcast, our podcast plug, perhaps. You can edit this out if you want.
You go for it.
But yeah, we just launched a podcast where our executive director was talking about wealth taxes and how much of a fallacy wealth taxes are, and how, a very small wealth tax is equivalent to something like CGT being at like 60, 70, 80%, for example. Yeah. So 1 or 2% wealth taxes, because you're only taxing the margin in CGT and you're taxing the whole thing with wealth tax. So it makes the numbers look very, very different, but actually the impact on the portfolio is massive. And I'm sure that most people would work that out. So, that's the first foray that you'll see for us really, really sticking up for families, for wealthy individuals and talented individuals that will be wealthy tomorrow.
The risk takers. That's really when people have made the effort to go out on their own.
And actually, who was it? It said, governments don't grow economies. It's individuals and businesses that do that. It's very, very simple. Allow them, give them the space to do that, and they'll do it. They'll find efficient solutions. They'll find the inefficiencies in markets and make them efficient. Let them do that. And if you let them do that, everybody wins. At the moment, we're obsessed with regulating those people into oblivion.
Well, here. Hopefully a lot more of that. John, we're very much looking forward to working with you more and the IEA. We're going to be hosting some events actually over with you guys at your HQ, and probably even filming some of these podcasts there. So we'll get some interesting people on there, and I'm very keen to hear more from you guys. Thank you for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Wow, what a chat, what a guy. I'm always slightly in awe of John. He's, as I said, coming in, he's fluent and he knows what he's talking about, doesn't he?
Yeah, and he definitely does. I think it's great to have that have someone, boots on the ground in the political sphere, who can kind of give us that insight, because, we're talking to these people in finance, and, that there's a bridge for sure between finance and politics, and it's all interconnected. And having someone like John very close to our community and close to us personally, I think he's a great advocate for everything that we're trying to gear towards. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Stay tuned. We'll have a next episode out soon. And
let's go get it.